Hi kids, this is the Lincoln Berean Kids podcast where your parents finally get to learn about the big God story with you. My name's Caleb Bowman, and I'm so excited that today I get to tell you about another part of the big God story from the Bible. Kids, I have a little challenge for you. If you can, tell your parents right now what part of the big God story we'll be talking about today. See you on the other side.
Everyone, every day, living on mission.
Hey guys, so for this story we had 3 different parts. The last 2 go together, and this first one takes place at a different time than the others. So I'm just going to start out by reading it for us. When Jesus came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, "Lord, if you are willing, make me clean." Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." Immediately he was cleansed of his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, "See that you don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer the gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them." In this story, like the other 2 stories that we'll see, Jesus showed his power over disease and sickness. Now, let's jump into our other 2 stories to see what Jesus will do next. If they do, the skins will burst. The wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved. As Jesus was talking to some religious leaders about fasting, a man came up to him in a panic and knelt before him. "My daughter has just died, but come and put your hand on her, and she will live." So Jesus went with him, and so did his disciples. "Come quickly," the man said. "She could die any minute." So they tried to go quickly, but it was difficult, as there was a huge crowd around Jesus. Everyone was bumping and bustling and busying themselves trying to see the Jesus that they had heard about. And now they were especially excited. Hopefully they'd get to see this man's daughter healed of a disease. If you talk to your parents, one thing that we're learning right now in Big Church is that the people and the crowds loved miracles, but they didn't always love God. But as they were walking, Jesus stopped. He turned around and said to the crowd, "Who touched me?" The Pharisees whispered, "What is this man talking about? Everyone's touching him. There must have been 100 people who have touched him in the last minute. Anyway, shouldn't he be more worried about saving this man's daughter's life?" Another said. But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then a woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, and told him the whole truth. She had had a bleeding problem for 12 years, and she had gone to every doctor possible, spent all of her money to try to fix this problem that made her an outcast in her society. But when she touched Jesus, she was healed. But Jesus knew that he didn't just have to heal her disease. He also had to heal her heart. So he turned and said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." The whole time the crowd was very anxious. They wanted to go and see if he could also save this man's daughter. Would he get there in time? Would he be able to save her even if he did? The crowd thought. But Jesus wasn't very concerned about these things. He knew that he had all power over disease and sickness, and even death. And on this day, he almost got to act like we were in heaven with him, and that those things didn't exist. So when servants of the man whose daughter was very sick came up to him and told him that his daughter was dead, Jesus overheard him and said, "Do not worry. Don't be afraid. Just believe." As they walked along, the crowd got smaller and smaller. I guess Jesus couldn't save this man's daughter. Why did he go so slow? What point is there following him around anymore, they thought. As they approached the man's house, Jesus only allowed 3 of his disciples to come in with him. As they came in, everyone who loved this man's daughter was crying and mourning over the death of their friend. But Jesus said, "The child is not dead, but asleep." They all looked at him angrily and laughed at him. "What does this man mean?" they said. "Why doesn't he just go away so we can be sad?" But instead of going away, Jesus sent everyone else out of the house. He went to the child and said, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." And immediately, after being in bed for hours or even days, she stood up and started walking around like nothing had ever happened. In this story, Jesus showed his absolute and complete power over sickness and disease and death. This week, we should be able to understand what it was like to be the bleeding woman or somebody around her, what it was like to be the man with leprosy, being isolated and alone, or even to be like the man whose daughter died and rose from the grave, scared and rushing to have anybody be able to help him save his daughter. It's important to remember that God has everything going on this week in his control. God could save every single person sick right now with the coronavirus or any sickness. I know there are kids listening to this right now whose parents don't have the coronavirus but have cancer or any number of other diseases. And while we hope and pray that they are saved from those, we know that our sin has caused everyone to die, whether it's now or in the future. That's why Jesus came to save us from our sins, because death isn't a problem without sin. And if you put your trust in Jesus, when you die, just like Jesus, death won't be a problem. You'll rise again in heaven in a perfect relationship with him forever. And if you just have trouble imagining or believing what a perfect relationship with Jesus looks like in heaven, what we need to do is to start a growing, better and better relationship with him today. It won't solve all your problems, but if that's what we believe, we're safe, because Jesus will one day come and save us forever. Wow, that really was another amazing part of the big God story. But wait, we're not done yet. It's time for you guys to talk about this story with each other. It's question time. Alright guys, so if you've been listening with us, I'm going to do the questions a little bit different today. I'm just going to quickly read 2 questions, and then you guys can talk about it as a family. The first question is, why did the woman touch Jesus' clothes? The second question is there anything that you need God's help for today? And I'll just say, I think one of the best things we can ask for is for God to help us fight our sin. So if any sin that you might have comes to mind that you think Jesus could help you fight, that might be a really good thing to ask for God's help with. That's all that I have for you guys today. Next week, we will be summarizing the whole big God story, and hopefully see that you and me are still a part of it today. Thank you guys for listening. See ya.